Your SIP is not buying the growing companies of India's consumption story, and that is the reality. Because a lot of growth in India's consumption story today is coming from unlisted D2C companies, which your SIPs cannot buy. So what do? To talk about it all, we have today B Gop Kumar, the MD and CEO of Axis Mutual Fund. We talk about flat markets, international investing, and the lower opportunity to invest in the consumption story of India today. Let's get into it. So, sir, I'll get right into it. Of course, there is a huge part of the Indian wealth creation story. A big narrative has been the rising consumption story, right? But something has shifted in the last 18 months or so, where the urban demand has weakened, the volume growth has also slowed down. So, when all of this is happening, what does it really mean for the Indian equity markets, and where do you think the consumption story will go from here?
I think broadly we need to think about the way the consumer story is building up. I think I'm in the markets for the last 26 years. I think there are patches of consumer stories getting much more orchestrated, much more impact on the markets. But when you really look at it's more of a cyclical way of looking at it. So if you look at FMC as a category, in my view, it's very, very cyclical. It's not a structural changes happen. But I also see that urban demand is also moderated. There was a huge amount of urban consumption happening, not on the rural side. But we need to look at and think about what is the structural changes happening in this country. You see a rural demand is okay because we have elevated MSP prices today by the government. The subsidies are going to the last end of the consumer there. So rural is a larger demand than urban. But the preferences of products, what we buy has changed. I think that is
correct.
largely changed. So you need to think about from that point of view that how much is that social media is impacting individuals? How are the private labels are looking today? I think my view is that consumer story is there. It is not overdone. I think there are reports where people talk about it saying is that India has overdone the consumer story. But when you look at the recent reform changes, what is brought on the GST, I think consumer story will pick up much faster, in my view. But it had some, I'll not say accident, just a blockage of the global turmoil, what happened. I think otherwise we had a flight glide to move up pretty well on the consumer story.
As a theme, consumption has been a very consistently growing theme, right? I mean, because the very fact that consumption means that, of course, there are things that you need to buy that you need for survival, that you need for your everyday needs. So for this theme to slow down, isn't it like a little jittery?
It's not jittery in the sense that there are substantial portion of today's consumption may not be in the listed entities of the markets today. It's not the companies which are listed. There are companies which are unlisted, and I see them as a larger players today. The private labels have done much better. The channels of distribution have changed dramatically, and our ability to distribute on platforms are much better than doing a physical distribution today. I used to ask the similar questions today. If you go back 10 years back and go 10 years back today to your closets, you don't see the same brands, right?
Absolutely.
That has changed for you also, right? I do and check what my wife uses or my sister uses or my daughter uses. It's not substantially changed. In that sense, larger companies also today looking at and buying out these brands. You have seen that large brands doing it.
Right.
Third point which I want to emphasize is that there's enough familiarization happening in FMCG. That's where the margins are going to be. So my view is that one is distribution is getting very broad-based. It's becoming largely Bharat. The second point is about there are private labels are becoming much more prominent. People are willing to try because of the social media
Yeah, the
impact.
experimentation has increased.
Oh,
I think the
huge.
shift from loyalty to experimentation has happened. But now there's so much more experimentation with more direct-to-consumer brands coming in.
That's a reality. I think FMCG companies also have really realized that. I think there's large changes happen. I think my view is that this story will start playing out much better. There are platform companies getting listed now.
Correct.
And that will impact on the markets today. I think still FM story is still not come out fully at the potential. I think when we have a very good consumption cycle, you will see that. And we've seen that historically that and another point always I believe that FMCG companies will do well when there is a fair amount of inflation, in the sense that their ability to increase prices are better during inflation times. And when the inflation goes down, they don't reduce prices. And generally, you see the margins expansion on FMC companies. That's the reality.
But sir, this whole direct-to-consumer brands, the rise has been unprecedented in our country, right? I mean, even in 2025, I think the market size of D2C brands has grown to about 7.3 lakh crores in market size. But these are, of course, not listed companies. So is that a missed opportunity in the consumption story for retail investors?
Not exactly. I think you can play it differently. I think, as I said earlier, the potential of these private labels have still not played fully. And if you look at categories like just not food, but if you look at wellness, it's going to be a larger brand in the D2C. So if you look at traditional FMCG, have not played largely on the wellness side.
Correct.
I think wellness is one of the largest category now.
Absolutely.
I think.
But there is no exposure that retail investors can take today to such sectors.
I think two or three things happening. I think there are platform companies getting listed, so you can indirectly play that. Second is that large FMCG companies today start acquiring these large brands, the smaller brands. You would have seen a couple of ones in last 10 years. The largest one acquiring an Ayurvedic brand. People are penetrating into brands which are very, very localized brands.
Right. I mean, HUL acquired Minimalist and, the skincare brands. So a lot of that is happening.
They even acquired a small brand out of Kerala, which is an hair oil company. It's not restricted to newer categories. Also, they go deeper into the categories which they never presented. I think that changes happened, and large multinational FMC companies also become much more localized now in terms of their distribution strategy and their product strategy. I think my view is that it will take time. Not that every brand which is in D2C platforms which will change, but my view is that there are platform companies you can still play. There are listed companies which play these D2C brands.
So coming back to the topic that we were on, sir, which is consumption. Another disruptive thing that has happened, I think, in this country when it comes to consumption is, of course, quick commerce. So earlier, of course, there used to be distribution used to be a big moat for these large FMCG companies. Distribution and supply chain. Now, of course, it has been replaced. Shelf space has been replaced by screen space.
Yes.
And even distribution is no longer the moat because even a small brand can have national availability via quick commerce.
Yes.
So do you think this whole quick commerce wave has disrupted the traditional moats of large FMCG companies?
To some extent, yes, but I think if you really looked at, they've really adopted that. It's not that they ran away from the newer platforms. Both has merits, and I've seen that there are some brands, both works together. For example, what you see in the digital media is what you pick up in the store. So it is not that large FMCG companies have a choice to say that I'll not be in digital. So I think if you look at maybe 30 years back, the distribution is based on pure retail, which is distributed through a Kirana store, and then came the large format stores, then there's a modern trade came in. The multiple channels have come in. So my view is that large companies also innovated. It's
They've
not them.
always
Yeah.
adapted and survived.
Yeah.
But I think the entry barrier has become quite low now, right? I mean, earlier, if you had to, establish an FMCG company, it was so difficult because how will you, crack the distribution part of it? But now all you have to do is list yourself on quick commerce and get started.
There are a lot of brands which are private labels. So when we talk to them, very interesting is that they don't manufacture. They don't manufacture. Basically, they own brand. They hold the product composition. They go back to the contract manufacturers, get it done, and they go and sell it on the this large platform. But interesting is that earlier, when you want to do an FMCG product, you have to do a complete supply chain.
Correct. You had to own the manufacturing.
You had to own the
you had to own the
manufacturing,
packaging.
supply chain,
Right.
all back end, right? Today, they just do it. And the manufacturers who are manufacturing in somewhere in Himachal Pradesh delivers it in 24 hours time at your home.
Earlier, you were talking about wellness and travel. So, of course, people are also becoming very experiences led. So, that is a trend that also is happening in consumption, right? Anything that you have to add on that?
The biggest mode is about premiumization. I think how are you positioning a product has become very important. And every FMCG companies, any consumption-led companies are now focusing on premiumization. That actually is improving their margins. The people want to consume the best of the class in that. I think if you look at number of international brands come to India last 10 years today. I don't think we had a super luxury brands in the country, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. And
Today,
now a
if you
lot
look-
of these e-com platforms have been able to launch so many
Yeah,
international
if you look at
brands.
the large brand stores are there in the high-end malls, but you also get the similar product on the high-end platforms. And people are looking for value for money. And there is also some perception-driven buying. And the premiumization is one thing which is picking up pretty well.
Consumption has a direct impact on how India's GDP grows and everything. We also know that the last 18 months or so have been quite flat for the Indian markets, while of course now we're seeing, I think, some signs of recovery. One advice that became extremely prominent in the last 2 years is that retail investors should also take international exposure in their portfolio. But the systemic reality, the regulatory reality is that it's not easy to take international exposure because of the $7 billion ceiling that, AMCs have. So how does a retail investor really, in a reliable way, take in, exposure to international equities?
Gift City will come in. Next 45 days, we will launch a retail scheme there. So you can start doing at $100. I think that's a retail scheme what we've launched now. We also are digitizing the whole journey. We can give to you on the digital platform. So today what is happening is that
Because in Gift City today, it's not very accessible
because the
to
documentation
investors.
problem. So we have solved it.
Okay.
So we'll have 100% digital journey.
Is that an industry-wide thing that you're saying or at
I think a
Access?
couple of AMCs are trying it. I think we are there. Next 45 days, we will be able to launch the Gift City journey. Once that is done, then all platforms like you can just get a client like a normal mutual funds.
Oh, that will make things, of course, much simpler.
The only thing is that we are working with the bank with that SIP because every time when you're required to do some changes and go back to the bank, that work is happening. I think once we crack it, I think SIP will work pretty well
Okay.
on this platform. And we are working with IFCA very closely. We had our international fund 3-4 years back.
You had to stop inflows in May.
We stopped inflow because our cash levels were going high. And I'm almost there on the limit. From a larger interest of the investors, I thought that I should stop because the existing investors started having the returns goes down. And the tracking error between the shoulders fund, which customers was putting money, compared to our fund, the differential was going up. There's no point taking and sitting on the cash. Because I'm very clear about cash levels that my job is not asset allocation. You're given money to put me on international equities, I will go and invest there. I'm not a wealth manager there. I'm a manufacturer of products. So I tell in our funds also that we are not the guys who take cash calls. It is up to the RAs like you to decide what should be the cash levels in a customer's portfolio, not at the mutual fund level.
So, Froman, I also wanted to double click on this that, of course, we spoke about international investing. You also have a fund which is Access Large and Mid Cap Fund, where you also keep allocation of about 15 to 25% international allocation. Is that a very intentional call that you have taken that given this current market scenario, that's the kind of allocation that you want to maintain? And B, is that a reliable way for a retail investor to take exposure to international investing? Because tomorrow he won't find out if the exposure becomes 5% or the exposure becomes 25%. So in the larger scheme of their asset allocation, let's say that he's decided I want 10% international exposure, but the fund manager can decide to change the allocation. So there's not really a reliable way for them to take a particular asset allocation, right?
Yeah, I'll come to the specific point here. I think we did a large and made, and we are the only one guys that point of time. Only few, if I can put that, with the international exposure. And it's the fund manager's discretion to,
Change
to
the
change the thing.
allocation.
So
Yes.
we had put in large and made, and as of now, we have got 8.5% exposure on global equities. It is one way the investor get exposure, and leave that exposure ability to the fund manager to decide whether he can go up to 30%. So if you are given a money to a discretionary mandate to a fund manager, let him decide. So there are large cycles. It's not the entire cycles are, just look at and say, today is doing well. I want to put money. I think it requires enough research. Large and mid is a large opportunity because it also has got international exposure, and let the fund manager decide how much allocation he wants to do across the country specific. From a fund perspective, what percentage of bet he wants to take on the international equities. I think so. It's a good one to do instead of you complicating your life by coming through a gift city or a dedicated
So
fund
this
to
is a
country
good
specific.
workaround for
Yeah, it's good
international
workaround. For
exposure, right?
example, if you have to give a gift city, I'll give you a gift city, maybe a country specific fund or an ETF, which are very, very thematic or country focused. If you have to do a broad base in exposure, large and mid is the right thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir. I think this has been like a wonderful conversation on India's consumption story, international investing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.